Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening sa tagapanood ng video na to kung nasan ka man. And we are here today to give you a bit of insight on the age of disinformation. And for today's video, kasama ko naman sina Aeyan, si Brentt, at si Eman para makapagbigay ng mga experiences nila regarding the rampage of disinformation here in the Philippines. Pero before ang lahat, mag-reminisce muna tayo sa mga nangyari ng mga nakaraang mga linggo, which is ang 2022 elections. So for the 2022 elections, the presidential candidates were Ernesto Abella, Calio de Guzman, Roberto Gonzales, Panfilio Lacson, Faisal Mangondato, Bongbong Marcos, Jose Montemayor, Isko Moreno, Manny Pacquiao, and Leni Robredo. The respective vice presidential candidates would be Lito Atienza, Walden Bello, Rizalito David, Sara Duterte, Manny Lopez, Kiko Pangilinan, Willie Ong, Carlos Serapio, and Tito Soto. As you can see from the screen, here is a map denoting which presidential candidate won which province during the canvassing of the results. As per the official count of the Commission on Elections and the PPCRV, Bongbong Marcos took a staggering lead of 58.77% of the total votes, which amounted to 31,629,783 votes. Meanwhile, second placer Leni Robredo, who got 27.94% of the total votes, which amounted to 15,035,773 votes in total. So, how did that happen? We'll see more as we go on with the discussion. Now that I have provided you with a situation or some context that shook the election today, we ask ourselves, how did we end up here? Have we not learned from the painful lessons of the past? This time, tanungin naman natin si Eman kung ano nga ba ang iba't ibang mga pangyayari that eventually led to the return of the Marcoses in power.
Yeah. So how did we end up here? That's a very nice question. So how did the age of this information start here in the Philippines, and how has it affected us as a country? So we can see here that Juan Gabriel Pompi Lavinia, soon to be former President Rodrigo Duterte's social media campaign manager, denied the accusations that the Duterte campaign team has any links to Cambridge Analytica after a photo surfaced from Facebook with him and now suspended Cambridge Analytica CEO Alexander Nix, along with other members of the Duterte campaign. Then, some of them even serving in his cabinet and political team. They met in 2015, a year before the election before the start of the election period for President Duterte's candidacy. So, what does this mean? It means that Cambridge Analytica, known for its ability to manipulate and use information against or for someone, they're able to use that, and it would prove na may connection yung two parties. And it could even, the power of Cambridge Analytica is to use that data to rechange or rebrand someone's image, which we'll see in the next article. So Brittany Kaiser, a whistleblower against Cambridge Analytica, spoke to Rappler's Maria Ressa about the request of the Marcoses, specifically Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos, to rebrand the family image from bloody dictators to whatever seems to please the masses to vote for them. Internally, according to her, there was a debate amongst the staff, and some, including their CEO, saw this as a financial opportunity. According to her, they undertook just enough research to figure out what people believe about a certain family, individual, politician, and then you need to figure out what could convince them to feel otherwise. And they managed to do so, as you would see in today's time. So, given the certain circumstances we're in, with authoritarian leaders on the rise, how do we move on from here? Tatanungin naman natin si Aeyan to find out more about the implications of disinformation and fake news.
Ayan, thank you for that, Eman. And tingnan naman natin ngayon how vital it is for us to push back and do something about this. So we ask ourselves, what do we do now that we live in a world that is so easy to manipulate and spread disinformation? Seeing that Philippines remains as the social media capital of the world, diba? 6 straight years na tayong social media capital of the world. Lunod na lunod ang mga Pilipino sa social media, lalong-lalo na sa Facebook. Ayan, kung saan madaling magpalaganap, magpakalat, at magpapaniwala ng mga tao sa mga fake news. Ibig sabihin, kung lunod na lunod ang mga Pilipino sa Facebook, lunod na lunod din tayo sa milyong-milyong disinformation na binabato sa atin. Baka dahil dito, kaya din tayo pinag-eksperimentohan at ginawa tayong isa sa mga bansang naging petri dish ng Cambridge Analytica dahil gustong-gusto natin ng chismis, yan, mga kamarites, share tayo ng share ng mga sa Facebook ng kung ano-ano, kahit wala naman talagang credible source, basta't may CTTO feeling natin okay na yon. At makikita natin na technology and social media are both very versatile weapons that we can use to either keep spreading the disinformation or fight against it. Ano bang laban na dapat nating piliin? And paano natin mabibigyan ng hustisya ang mga biktima ng fake news? Because this fight is not only for our present generation, but also for the future of the future generation. We all know that this fight is not an easy fight. So makikita naman natin sa screen, ilan lamang to sa mga naging issue na mula sa sa current administration pala natin. So ayan, 22 journalists and media people have already been killed under the current administration. One news outlet was shut down, anti-terror law was passed, and numerous activists and lawyers are being hunted down and even killed. So people in power are doing everything that they can to silence us. And sa video nga ni Maria Ressa sa kanyang talk sa Yale University, this is how democracy crumbles. So as Timothy Snyder said, to rip the heart out of a democracy, you go after the facts and you start by lying and spreading disinformation. Madaling ma-dishearten and mawalan ng pag-asa, especially in the face of a challenge as big as this system of disinformation. But to give us hope and some rationality, we turn to philosophy and ethics for a deeper understanding of what we're facing. And before that, tanongin naman natin si Brentt. Brentt, if you were to describe disinformation in one word, ano yung word na to?
Ayan, maraming salamat, Aeyan. If I were to describe fake news and disinformation, it would be the word wildfire. It spreads like a wildfire. One share, one post, one like, and a few seconds after, it's already a trending topic on Twitter, Facebook, and numerous news platform. Halimbawa nito ang biglang pagkalat ulit ng Nutriban na pinapakalat bilang proyekto daw ni Marcos na balak ituloy ng kanyang anak sa pagtakbo niya bilang Pangulo. Ngunit hindi alam ng nakakarami ang totoong nakaraan ng Nutriban. Sa madaling salita, ang Nutriban ay solusyon sa matinding gutom na dala ng rehimeng Marcos noon, kaya nakagulat kung paano kinayang baguhin ng fake news at disinformation ang pagtingin ng publiko sa Nutriban. In fact, Nutriban instantly trended in multiple social media sites, and according to Google Trends, it reached peak popularity within hours. Issues of fake information like buntis daw si Nadine, pumano na si Mr. Bean, or nahanap na raw ang Taliana Gold happen on a daily basis. When things like this happen and a lot of misleading information gains traction in a span of minutes, the issue turns into something worrisome. And when something is worrisome, we tend to react. And in a situation wherein we react, we have the choice to react. The actions to do or not do, the issue becomes an issue of ethics. And as with any ethical issue, we evaluate them using philosophical frameworks. There hasn't been much philosophy written about fake news because it's a modern day problem. However, there are excerpts written about the morality of lying and deception. And there are many frameworks that explores this, but for the purpose of this discussion, we turn to Emmanuel Kant and his work on the categorical imperative. Lying and deception are one of the things that Kant heavily discussed. As a rationalist, Kant described the act of lying as an impossibility. It operates on a maxim that if it were universalized and constituted a rule of permissible action, would deprive us of reliable access to a crucial source of truth and a reliable way to sort the true from the false, which I don't think is far from what we're experiencing as of the moment. Thus, the foundation of trust by which communication happens would simply erode dahil hindi din masisigurado kung ano ang laman ng bawat isa with full certainty. What we're left with is a society of distrust and inaction. Actively participating in this information violates the first formulation of this categorical imperative. We simply cannot create fake news because the first formulation urges us to act as if the maxim of your action were to become by your will a universal law of nature. This information presents moral harm to every person trying to engage in a honest discourse. Since we aren't able to determine with full certainty the things that other people think, we must act in accordance with truth and honesty to ensure public trust. Maria Ressa says it best: a world without facts means a world without truth and trust. Kant also demands us to respect the moral worth of all people. When we engage in disinformation, we see other people as instruments to our goals. When we spread fake news to gain political favor, for example, each reader is used and wielded to advance our own interests. When we use that speech to falsely represent the contents of our minds for the purpose of deceiving our audience, the ethical consequences are identical with lying. Walang pinagkaiba. The truth is na naloko ka pa rin ng ibang tao. But what we see is half the side of this information, which is those who actively spread it. How about the victims of this information who eventually become purveyors of this information? In a society with systemic inequality, wide gaps between classes, unequal access to certain things, where 100% of people are on Facebook, but not 100% have the luxury, time, and leisure to fact check, how do we draw the line between victim and purveyor? Kita natin na the issue of this information is so complex and multi-layered. It leads us far from the truth. And as stated prior, we are reaping the effects of a full-blown disinformation pandemic. If history were to tell us something about this information, it's that it has been here for a long time already. We recall the narrative that AIDS is a disease of homosexuals. Similarly, people first called the COVID-19 a hoax which led to the death of many people. In terms of politics, it has led to the election of many authoritarian leaders like Trump and Duterte. Knowing its consequences, questions like who to blame and how as individuals can we help naturally arise. Should we turn to the government? In theory, it would be natural and ideal for the government to intervene and provide a solution. However, it isn't quite clear how this would turn out. In Singapore, for example, the Singaporean government passed a fake news law in 2019 that would protect its citizens from the harmful effects of disinformation. But the very same law that aimed to protect democracy gave the government liberty to decide which to label as fake news and not. Should we turn to these large tech companies whose platforms have been the breeding ground for disinformation? If Facebook and Twitter have been so integral to the rise of fake news, shouldn't they also be held accountable for cleaning up the mess? However, in most countries, free speech laws have basically guaranteed that companies won't be held responsible. These platforms face external pressure to play a more proactive role in dismantling massive networks of disinformation. And they have placed some measures in place, but with the massive pace by which this information spreads, these companies have to be more aggressive. Despite the uncertainty on who to obligate, it is clear that we have to start somewhere, somehow. Our individual actions must be complemented by the actions of corporations and the government. This, after all, affects our democracy, one of the finest threads that bind us all together. This time, we ask each other our personal experiences, sentiments, thoughts, and opinions regarding the discussion we just had. Let's first ask naman ngayon si Aeyan kung ano ang personal experience niya and thoughts on this information.
Ayan. Thank you, Brent. So, ako, personal experience ko, last election, so mainit kasi yung usaping politika sa pamilya namin. So, umuwi kami sa Nueva Ecija. And sa lugar namin, sa Quezon, barrio pa rin siya. And tuwing election talaga, maraming patayan na nagaganap. So, hindi pa tayo tumutungtong dun sa parang civil kapag pagdating sa election. And ayun, nag-uusap kami ng tito ko and ng family ko. Tapos yung lolo ko kasi lasing siya that time. And then, syempre nababanggit kung sino yung mga bet natin sa pagdating sa pagka-presidente. And then, dumating na sa point na nalilabel na ako as NPA, ganyan, aktivista and all. In fact, wala rin namang masama, di ba, sa mga ganong terms. Pero dahil nga sa disinformation and fake news, nalilabel ang mga tao na to as terrorists. lalo na din pagdating sa anti-terror law, nakakapasal lang. So ayun, ang worry ko lang is baka may makarinig na ibang tao and hindi alam yung konteksto ng pinag-uusapan namin. Naririnig na, ay may aktivista doon or may NPA doon, baka masabi nila yung gano'n. And dahil nga talamak yung patayan and red tagging sa lugar namin, we'll never know what will happen next, di ba? So nakakatakot talaga bilang isang kabataan ang mga ganitong panre-red tag at fake news patungkol sa mga nare-red tag. Ayun, ikaw naman Carl, ano naman yung masasabi mo?
Yung sa akin naman kasi, hindi naman siya ganun ka nakakatakot na experience katulad kay Aeyan. Medyo low-key lang yung akin. Kasi yung sa akin, may one time kasi na nagbabantay lang ako dito sa tindahan namin since umalis yung mga magulang ko, parang nakipag-date sila or bumili ng something sa labas. Tapos during no, ito yung mga panahon ng election period ng mga nagka-campaign yung mga tao. Tapos meron akong narinig ng mga bata habang nanonood lang ako ng YouTube, nakaupo, parang minding my own business. Ganun. Naririnig ko sila, napapalapit sa tindahan namin, kumakanta sila ng bagong Pilipinas, bagong mukha, blah blah blah. Tapos may mga ibang bata na sabi, Lenny Lugaw, parang gano'n. Parang hindi nila naiintindihan yung context behind dun sa mga sinasabi nila. Tapos nung napunta na sila sa tindahan namin, tapos bumili sila, tinanong ko sila, bakit ganyan yung sinasabi nila regarding Lenny or dahil bakit kinakanta nila yung specific na chant na yun. Kasi ang kaya lang nilang ibigay sa akin na sagot ay yun daw kasi yung sinasabi ng mga magulang nila. So medyo nakaka-concern siya. Kasi yung information na nakukuha ng mga bata and since mga bata nga sila, madaling ma-mold yung isip nila kung ano yung mga ba talaga yung version ng katotohanan. And since mas lalo na kung yung information na to nanggagaling sa isang tao na pinagkakatiwalaan talaga nila, katulad ng mga magulang nila, ay ma-mold na or ma-fix na sa utak nila na tama yung information na to. Since nanggaling siya sa magulang nila, kasi di ba pinoprotektahan sila ng magulang nila. Wala namang sinasabi yung mga magulang nila na mali para sa kanilang mga bata. Pero siyempre sa atin, sa perspective natin, hindi yung totoo. Na dapat may nagsasabi na, oy mali yan, hindi yan yung talagang nangyari. So ayun nga. So parang tinatanggap lang nila yung katotohanan na ganun lang, na hindi talaga sila nagpa-fact check or whatever. Tapos it speaks a lot for the macro aspect of our community. Na kung ganun yung nangyayari sa mga micro, at kung papalakihin pa natin sila, at kung lalaki yung mga bata na to, na ganun yung pag-iisip, ano na ang mangyayari para sa kinabukasan natin? Di ba, nakakatakot lang. So Eman, curious naman ako, ano yung mga personal thoughts mo regarding dito?
Ayan. So, yung pinaka-experience ko kasi with disinformation is from social media. I saw posts by different news outlets detailing truth about the martial law and elections. And however, underneath the comment sections, there are trolls leaving behind false information for the masses to see. Like, sobrang nakakatakot siya kasi kitang-kita na yung pagka-blatant niyang pagiging blatantly false information niya, pagiging blatantly fake information niya, na these fake news are presented by individuals na parang pagka binasa mo, parang may point may something Parang yung timpla nila doon is nakakaantig sa masa na parang mapapaisip ka na yung word doon is parang oo nga no. Yun yung natimpla ng mga fake news purveyors, yung mga tao nagsasabi ng fake news na tinatry nilang i-reshape yung mga narrative na oo nga no, mapaisip ka on the basis of truth. Na yung sinasabi nating truth na ganito, yung iba sinasabi na hindi, and yung iba na napapakinggan and napapaisip tayo na baka possible yung truth na sinasabi na, which is hindi naman dapat. Kasi hindi yan yung katotohanan. Yung katotohanan is presented with facts and information in that time. So, even more scary for me is yung fake news na yun, isa pa, is that presented by these individuals are word-for-word copies of one another. It's saddening to see that those who give off this kind of information are organized and effective. They are organized, may rango sila, na they have plans when doing this and they have plans when doing that. And when may target silang ganung post from a certain social media news outlet or a social media star or a person famous in our country, ta-target nila and then dun sila maglalatag ng fake news para magkaroon ng engagement, which is sad kasi may organization sila, may plans sila for this. And how do I know it's effective? Simple. Take a look at who won the election of 2022. So, with that, Karl, ano bang final thoughts mo on this matter?
So yun na nga, disinformation talaga is not just targeted in a political setting, but the damage and repercussions na magagawa nito in different aspects are far-reaching and very dangerous. From historical revisionism, red tagging, human rights violation, brainwashing, at kung ano-ano pang pwede mong maisip at masabi ng mga trolls na para i-label sa ating lahat. Nakakatakot maisip na ang line between the truth and the lies ay unti-unti nang nagiging blurry with what's happening sa situation natin. Responsibilidad natin ngayon hindi lang bilang mga scholar ng bayan, bagkus responsibilidad natin bilang isang Pilipino na ipaglaban ang katotohanan sa dilim na umaaligid sa atin. Hindi natatapos ang ating paglaban sa disinformation at fake news sa eleksyon na nangyari. Ito na ngayon ay isang paraan ng pamumuhay nating mga namulat sa katotohanan na hindi kailanman maipipikit ang ating mga mata sa mga mali na ating nakikita sa ating komunidad. Isa itong hamon na ibinigay ni VP Leni sa ating mga Pilipino pero mas lalo na sa ating mga kabataan na magtataguyod ng panibagong kinabukasan natin. So, di ba nga sinabi ni VP Leni, mas radikal ang pagmamahal. Ngunit malaman sana natin kung kailan tayo dapat magmahal at kailan tayo dapat lumaban para sa ikabubuti ng ating rosas na bukas. We now pose this question to you, dear listener. How do we draw the line between free speech and spreading disinformation in today's global context? So, pwede mo mapag-isip-isip yan habang natapos na ang video na to at nabigay na namin ang mga impormasyon na dapat mo marinig. And with that, maraming salamat po sa inyong pakikinig at ipagpapatuloy natin ang ating